Today let's talk about some terms and phenomena that have gained tons of popularity in social media and pop culture overall, mostly pertaining to dating and relationships, all kinds of relationships, not just romantic. You might have heard of Icks. It is the sudden feeling of repulsion towards someone you are romantically interested in, most of the time, often caused by minor or irrational things.
What is your biggest ick?
Boys falling over.
When they can't swim.
When people use the strap across their backpack.
I once got it because someone couldn't parallel park.
The astrology girls and like the stone girls and shit like that. Like,
if we were born the same year and I found out that I was born a few months before you, you're done.
I don't like when I show them a movie that I really like and they're like, eh.
He watched my story and didn't slide up. He didn't reply. Ick.
So these are some of the icks when I asked you all on Instagram. You're both crossing the road, you have plenty of time, and yet he starts jogging to get across. When they mew. What's mew? Mew. Pokemon? Asking people their icks. Valid. When she swears or curses a lot. I actually curse more than you guys know of. Complaining all the time. Bad hygiene. One pic feet, please upload. When they don't read books. That's actually one of my icks. Unnecessarily long nails. Chipped nails. Mismatched socks. When someone is way too clean. Skinny jeans. When he has a girl best friend. What do you guys think about that? Burping on dates. Doesn't wash his hands after using the washroom. That is divorce-worthy, in my opinion. Reading self-help books. Sweaty, sticky babies. When do you ever come across sweaty, sticky babies? Okay, I think we'll end at that. I remember getting the ick years and years ago. I had somewhat of a crush on someone and we were all at this gathering or party of some sort. And this person, let's call him Ian, tried really hard to be funny in front of the group. He started dancing really crazy, but really he was mostly just holding people and jumping and yelling, and no one was really amused by Ian's behavior. And I felt it in my stomach. There it was. The ick. Now, of course, at the time, I did not know what that feeling was. Like, I had never heard of the word ick, as I'm sure most people had not. So when I tried explaining to my friends why I felt so turned off and repulsed by Ian, I couldn't quite verbalize it, and I couldn't explain why I felt so strongly about it either. So what is the psychology behind this seemingly random, very sudden turnoff that mainly women experience? Here is some of what I've read. As always, all sources will be linked below. The evolutionary perspective. Humans have evolved in a world where men were the protectors and gatherers. There were certain traits that were crucial for our survival and the survival of our offspring. And even though society has evolved in the last few thousand years, there are still so-called leftover evolutionary desires for potential mates to display certain characteristics and traits. These aren't usually things that we purposefully think about, but they're still there, lurking subconsciously. For instance, things that may be an indicator of poor health, poor nutrition, or poor hydration, like chapped lips, for example, may give us the ick. It might seem like a silly thing, but back in the hunter-gatherer days, those seemingly silly things could actually be the difference between life and death for you and your offspring. So I think of, in my case, when I got the ick on Ian all those years ago, perhaps I had subconsciously reacted to his behavior, because had he been doing that back in the day, perhaps that would have excluded us from the group or the tribe because people would find him to be annoying. And that could have been detrimental for our survival. Now, obviously, I don't know that that's actually what it was. It might not at all be that deep, but it might also be. And at the very least, I think it's interesting to think about. The attachment style perspective. Now, if you are new to attachment theory, basically there are 4 main attachment styles, and you can take different tests to find out which one is your main one. And your attachment style forms when you are a baby, and learning about it can give you lots of insight on how you bond emotionally with people. I really recommend this book to learn more about it. I'll put it up here somewhere. Now, according to this article I read, if you have an avoidant attachment style, you might be more prone to getting the ick. Because basically, when you're an avoidant, you struggle with getting close to people. You often pull away and find reasons to do so. You have a fear of rejection and abandonment and often don't get close enough to someone where they could hurt you. It's basically self-sabotage, right? So you might think, this thing that guy did that I'm seeing was kind of annoying and off-putting. I might as well just move on. There's no point in looking inward or discussing it or trying to rationalize why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. This relationship will probably not be successful anyway. You have different values and boundaries. I think this one is probably the one that makes the most sense. If you strongly believe in something and there is something that is very important to you and the other person does or says something that indicates that you are not aligned when it comes to that very thing, it's quite expected that you would get turned off or maybe even feel embarrassed. We sometimes get the ick because the person breaks some sort of moral or societal norm or code that most people would agree would be off-putting. Most people appreciate when a person has good hygiene and when they're kind, for example. Now, one ick that I saw being brought up a lot was when the person you are seeing is being rude to staff, when someone litters, and when someone tries to argue with you after you have told them no. And I would argue that those are more in the red flag territory, but we will get to that. It's complex. Now, sometimes we don't really actually know why we get the ick. Are we repulsed because the person is demonstrating a behavior that we actually dislike in ourselves and so we're just projecting? Are we actually not really into that person and so even minor things annoy us? Have we been influenced by society and cultural norms to find the type of behavior embarrassing or off-putting, like it's expected that you should be repulsed when we ourselves don't actually think so? Is our gut feeling simply very strong in sensing danger, even when the thing that gave us the ick might be seemingly insignificant? Perhaps our body's reacting for good reason. It's trying to keep us safe, even when we struggle to understand it. Needless to say, if we find ourselves experiencing the ick frequently and with different people to the point where it's actually interfering with our ability to build healthy, sustainable relationships, it might be a good idea to look inwards and do some self-reflection. But we should be able to also balance that with trust in ourselves and in what we're feeling. As you can probably tell, this is all quite tricky. You guys, we are just getting started and this is going to be a long video. I can feel it. With that being said, some of the topics we are discussing today can be quite serious and I really want to encourage anyone who is going through something difficult, maybe in your relationship or friendships or work or in life in general, to talk to someone. You don't ever want to be alone when you're dealing with difficult feelings. Grab a friend, grab a family member, anyone you can trust in your circle, in your community. Now, for some people, there are some things that you would rather get professional help with, or perhaps both, a friend and a therapist. I know I'm a big ranter. I like to repeat the same things over and over again to my friends, but I also like getting unbiased, helpful advice and actual practical steps towards improving whatever situation I'm in, and I get that from therapy. This video is in paid partnership with BetterHelp, the platform that connects you with a therapist. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. With BetterHelp, you can have your sessions via phone call, video chat, messaging, whatever and whenever is most comfortable for you. And there is no hassle to get started. You can use the link in my description box or go to betterhelp.com/Lana. Fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then in most cases you'll be matched with a therapist within 48 hours or less. And if you're matched with a therapist and you're just not connecting, which is common and it happens, you can easily switch to a different therapist at no additional cost to find the person that really feels right for you. Now, to try BetterHelp, click the link in my description box or visit betterhelp.com/Lana. Clicking that link helps support this channel, and it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Red flags. What's a red flag? The definition of red flag is basically watch out, danger. If you're hiking in a dry area, you might see one as a signal of high wildfire danger. If you're at a beach somewhere, it might warn you of dangerous water conditions. In relationships with other people, those we know and even those we don't, it's a signal that says this could possibly turn bad or dangerous.
Oh, you want to know a crazy red flag to look out for?
If he is talking about his ex in a bad way, saying how awful she was, putting her down.
Friends that talk shit about their other friends to you.
And if she had a pet pass away and she got a new pet within 6 months, red flag, bro.
I think it's a huge red flag when someone doesn't have any friends.
The biggest red flag of a company to me is bad onboarding.
That friend that always copies you.
Now I want to go back to one of the common icks, one that most would actually probably regard as a red flag. Being rude to staff, like waiters, for example. As this article writes, how people treat those who are not in a position to defend themselves is a good test of character. I've talked to some of my girlfriends, and you guys actually in my Instagram DMs about this, and why we feel so strongly about the whole being rude to staff thing. And one of the reasons is because it can signal to us that the person could potentially be abusive towards us, that they have a temper that they can't control, that they can't control their emotions, that they're impatient, and that they see themselves as superior somehow. And those aren't exactly desirable traits. They're quite the opposite. Now, I have worked several different types of service jobs where this power dynamic becomes apparent, and it truly brings out the worst out of people. It's quite frightening to see how some people seem to get this thrill out of treating you as being below them, and the satisfaction that they feel knowing that they are likely to get away with it. Those who have worked or are currently working service jobs, I know that you can relate. I remember this one customer in particular who came in at this job that I had a million years ago, and he was this large man in his 40s, I would say, and I was like late teens, early 20s. And so he comes in, he throws a bunch of papers in front of me and demands, not asks, demands that I Xerox these documents. And so he said, Xerox these documents for me. I said, oh, you would like me to make copies of these for you? Sure. And mind you, I'm Swedish, and this was in the US. So at first I had no idea what he was even talking about, but I quickly made the connection in my head because I knew that Xerox was, I think they were the first photocopying company, and apparently some people say, can you Xerox this, rather than saying, can you make copies or photocopy? Anyway, so he gets closer to me and he said, no, I said Xerox it. So speaking of red flags, that's just an example that came to mind. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all their red flags just look like flags. Now look, no matter how smart you think you are and that you actually are, anyone can and probably has ignored at least a couple of red flags in their lifetime. This could be in any situation, you know, job, friendships, when ordering food at a restaurant, something happens, someone says something or does something, or you just get this feeling in your tummy that something is off. But for a myriad of reasons, we might brush these feelings off. If we take dating, for example, you might brush it off because you don't want to ruin this exciting butterfly thing that you have going on with this new person. So you tell yourself that you're just being anxious or overthinking. You know, you don't want that stupid, silly little thing that someone said to burst your bubble. This is how many of us rationalize and try to justify red flags, right? I know at least some of you are feeling called out right now. Good. And now if it's a different setting, like a job, and the boss, let's say, is being inappropriate during the third and final interview, let's say, you might brush it off as, man, you know, it's probably just the way he says things. I'm sure he's super cool. Only for you to get the job and absolutely hate it because your boss makes everyone miserable. Now, has it gone too far? Now, with all of this being said, there is no denying that, at least on social media, this whole red flag conversation has gone a tiny bit too far. It seems it's becoming something we discuss and talk about lightly, almost comically, where pretty much anything and everything could be a red flag. Things that don't exactly communicate danger or serious incompatibility. I think words like ick, red flag, deal breaker, incompatibility are all being used sort of interchangeably. And sure, you know, they do intertwine sometimes, but they actually mean very different things, as I hope you have come to learn this far in this video, otherwise I'm just doing a terrible job explaining all of this. Now to sum this little section up, so something might be an incompatibility issue, like they want to get married and you don't, and therefore a deal breaker, but it's not necessarily a red flag. Unless maybe the reason for why someone wants or does not want to get married is a red flag, but let's not get into the weeds here. Gaslighting. So what is gaslighting? This thing that we are seeing and hearing about everywhere. Gaslighting basically is when someone manipulates you into questioning your sanity, your experience, your memory, even your reality. Now, as an example, someone might repeatedly insist that you are remembering something wrong, or that you are being too sensitive, or that so-and-so isn't a big deal, or that something never actually happened. It's a form of emotional abuse, and it doesn't just happen in romantic relationships, it can happen in any relationship, you know, family, friendships, work. Now, just like most words that become popularized, it's often misused. For example, having a disagreement with someone typically does not mean that that person is gaslighting the other. Sometimes we simply do see things differently, or remember them differently, or interpret them differently, even when our intention is to resolve things and to make peace. However, even during disagreements, it's important to take note of how we word things and how the other person words it too. There's a huge distinction between someone denying your experience, which would be gaslighting, versus someone acknowledging and accepting your experience while stating that they have a different one. And it also, you know, of course, depends on what details it is that are being disagreed upon. Perhaps you remember it as eating 3 cookies, but the other person clearly remembers it as you eating 4. This is not necessarily a case of either of you gaslighting the other, although it could be. I mean, this is a made-up scenario and we haven't made up the history of these 2 characters, so I don't know. But generally that would not be gaslighting. The point is that our memory can be quite tricky sometimes, and recollecting certain events isn't always fully accurate. But even so, if there were to be a pattern of someone seemingly remembering things differently over and over again, and where you find yourself being left confused, questioning yourself, there might be something worth looking deeper into. As this article writes, for a behavior to be deemed gaslighting, we need to ascertain that someone engages in these behaviors repeatedly. Now, I would say that it depends. You know, there are, of course, very serious instances, like let's say you were to be physically harmed by your partner, only for them to then later deny it and make you out to be the confused, crazy one. One instance of that would of course be enough, and no repeated behavior pattern would be necessary. This article goes on to say that gaslighting can be a difficult behavior to spot, but generally look for a pattern in which someone appears to be intentionally and repeatedly denying your experiences and realities for some form of gain or prevention of loss. Now I want to give another example for those who might still not be sure. Maybe you're in a situation that can be quite confusing. So let's say you are in a relationship and your partner's been coming home late for like a full work week, which isn't typical. And so you ask him about it in this case, and he says, "What? No, I haven't. I think you're being confused. You're not really checking the time correctly." And you start questioning yourself, thinking, maybe I did lose track of time. And on the next day it happens again. He comes home late from work and you might say something like, "What? No, I always come back at this time on Thursdays and Fridays. You just haven't been paying attention." And so again, you question yourself. You think to yourself, well, I can be quite forgetful, and sometimes I don't really pay attention. You might even apologize for coming off as insecure or annoying. And if you're watching this, you might think, well, isn't that just simply lying? Well, you're not wrong. He is lying in this made-up scenario, let's say, but he's lying with the intent to make you doubt your reality. To gain control, he is gaslighting you. Alright, now we're jumping back and forth in this video. I intentionally wanted this portion to be the last portion because I think it was quite fun. So I asked you all on Instagram, what's something that lots of people consider to be a red flag, but that isn't actually a red flag in your opinion? Perhaps you have your own story of how you thought something was a red flag, but it turned out not to be. Here is what you said. Wanting to be left alone for some time during the day, whether you are married or in a relationship. Choosing your family over your friends or girlfriend, I think it's not a red flag. Being in a relationship and still having friends of the opposite sex, I think it's fine. Jealousy, it's okay to a certain extent. It's important to consider your partner's feelings. Having a bad relationship with their family. There are many dysfunctional families out there. When he or she has never been in a long-term relationship before, not necessarily a red flag. Finding other people attractive, not attracted to them, but knowing they are attractive. Discussing exes and past relationships, many think that it means we are stuck. Being friends with their ex, many times that just shows the relationship ended with respect. Love bombing. Sometimes people really do fall head over heels without being narcissists. Let me know what you think about all of this and if you have anything to add to any of these lists, whether it's icks, red flags, incompatibilities, things that are not actually red flags, and I would love to read it. All right, I'll talk to you soon.